Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Brigand Rogue. This is a kind of a unique character build, but before I get started, disclaimer, this is a roleplay, casual play build. It is not meant for meta play. So Brigand Rogues are basically highwaymen, those kind of things. They live on the outskirts of society and avoid contact with most people because of the fact that they would much rather rob from you than be your friend. So the Brigand Rogue though is basically that. They're just rogues. They're bandits. So let's go ahead and get started by taking a look at the character information. As you can see, it says Brigand Rogue. We are an Imperial Warden for this. Now, I will be honest, the Brigand Rogue can be any class. It doesn't have to be the Warden. The Warden just happened to be the one that I made it on. But it does work with any class. I have tested this, and it works out really well. So, Imperial race, the reason I chose that is to basically show that even a tanky race can even play damage dealers and other stuff. So it's really nice. Gives you a good amount of max health, stamina, and a decent magicka pool, even with using dubious Cameron Throne. So, to get started, this character build is primarily a damage dealer. As you can see, we have 64 points in a stamina. It is a stamina damage dealer, and it can play other roles. You can play a tank and a healer also. To play it as a tank, you would take the 64 out of stamina, put enough into health to get you close to 30k, and then put the rest in stamina. This thing can tank dungeons, both normal and veteran, in the base game, and normal and veteran in DLC. Now, it probably could in hard mode also if you were a skilled enough player. But yeah, it works out pretty well. To play this as a healer, you would take the 64 points out of stamina, put it into magicka. And then you would probably want to get a different Mundus Stone. We'll get to that when we get to the Mundus Stone section. But as you can see, we have 12k, almost 13k max magicka, 21k health, 31k max stam as an Imperial. We do have a 647 mag recovery with a 1457 stam recovery. Now we do have a 2835 weapon damage with 42% weapon critical, 1607 spell damage with a 19% spell critical, 14k spell resist, 14k physical resist. We are using the Lover Mundus Stone. And this is to increase our physical and spell penetration, because we use a lot of physical damage output. We want that higher penetration value. Now, if you were going to play this as a tank, it's better to use the Lady Mundus Stone to increase your resistances. And if you want to play this as a healer, it's better to use the Atronach Mundus Stone for the higher mag recovery. Don't worry about spell crit. That will be taken care of with other tools at other sources. We also have Minor Berserk at all times because we have Birds of Prey on both bars, and we are using Dubious Cameron Throne as our primary food. This gives you max stam recovery, or high stam recovery, max stamina, and max health. They are lower pools than what you would normally get from like blue food or purple food, but we're mainly using this for the recovery rating. We want that high recovery rating so we can sustain a rotation really well. Moving on to our inventory and our equipment. In our bag, we do use tripods for when we're tanking, Dubious Cameron Throne for when we're playing stamina damage dealer, tripod or spell power pots for when we're playing healer, and weapon power pots or warrior power pots, stamina power pots, whatever you want to call them, as a stam DPS. Now, if you are going to play this as a tank or healer, it's best to use the Longfin Pasty with melon sauce. You can also use Witchmother's Potent Brew if you want to get more mag recovery out of it. You can use that. Now, going over the gear set, starting with the monster set, we do have Krogs. Now, Krogs is a really interesting set for this type of setup because the one piece adds more physical penetration. The two piece, when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn Drua limbs that create a shockwave in front of you, dealing X amount of physical damage every 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. That means this will hit 3 times in a row, and it can happen every 3 seconds. Alright, moving on to the next set, we are using Night Mother's Gaze, and a lot of people have been questioning this because a lot of people are like, that's a solo set. It's not a solo set, it's a damage dealer set. It's a set designed to improve your DPS, period. That's what it's designed for. And this one gives you on the 2-piece weapon critical, 3-piece weapon damage, 4-piece weapon critical, and the 5-piece. When you deal critical damage, you apply major fracture to the enemy, reducing their physical resistance by 5,000 turn 80 for 6 seconds. This is a great set if you want to break through people's resistances and get greater damage. And you can keep this applied to any enemy you deal critical damage to. It doesn't just apply to one target. It applies to any enemy you do critical damage to. So that's really good. Moving on to the next set, and this is going to be a question set, because people are going to wonder why. We are using the flanking set. So this is called Flanking Strategist set, and the 2-piece adds max stamina, the 3-piece adds weapon critical, the 4-piece adds weapon damage, and the 5-piece adds weapon damage to your damage abilities when you attack an enemy from behind or their sides. Basically what this is saying is if your tank is doing their job properly, most of the time a damage dealer is going to attack from the side or the back of the target. This is going to increase your weapon damage output with stamina based abilities for that purpose, because you're going to be attacking from the sides and from behind, so you're going to get greater damage output with this. I will try and show you on a target dummy what that looks like, but I can't promise anything. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, we're going to go over the traits and enchants we have on our gears, starting with the monster set. We are using a medium monster set, so both the head and the shoulders are medium. And with this, we have an infused trait on the helm. This increases the armor enchantment effect by 20%, so we get more resources out of it. We are using tri-stat here, so we can get more resources out of it. This just gives us a little bit more magic and stamina for better sustainability. Moving on to the shoulders, we do have a Divines max stamina. The Divines is basically going to boost any Mundus Stone you have equipped to a higher effectiveness by 7.5% per Divines piece. Now we do have 4 Divines pieces. The shoulders, the gloves, the belt, and the boots are all Divines. And this is going to give you a higher effectiveness of Mundus Stone for your Mundus Stone. Now, we also have stamina in all 4 pieces, so we can maximize our stamina pool to give us a greater stam pool itself. Now, the the one piece that is going to be light and heavy is going to be the belt and the chest. The belt is light because it is your lowest armor rating piece you have, and you want the rest of your armor pieces to be higher rating and resistances. You don't want to be using something else that's light unless you're using 5 medium on the body. Then you want your shoulders light and your helm heavy. So the chest, we are using a reinforced heavy armor chest. This gives you the higher amount of resistances out of any piece of gear that's set to reinforced, and that's because it's heavy armor. Heavy armor is just going to give you a high amount of resistances. It's designed for that. But this also gives you the highest amount of resistances because it's the biggest piece of armor you have. And we do have tri-stat in this as well to give us the ability to hybridize, but also to play more effectively with all 3 resource pools. Moving on to the leggings, we are using another infused piece here with a tri-stat enchant. This is to maximize our max stamina, health, and magicka a little bit more, just to give us a little bit more oomph to our character for playing the different roles. Now, moving on to the jewelry. On the jewelry, we have 2 Trirune rings, both of them equipped with weapon damage. The Trirune enchants or traits is to give us the higher max health, magic, and stamina. And if you compare it with like a baseline tri-stat that's not infused, you'll see that it gives 1 point more in health, in magic and stamina, and 1 point more in health versus the tri-stat. So it's kind of equal value there when it comes to that tri-stat, and it gives you a good balance of resources for your character no matter what role you're playing. And the reason for the 2 weapon damage, maximize weapon damage. That's primarily what we use. The stamina for this character is stamina DPS, so we want that higher weapon damage output. Now, moving on to the necklace, we are using a stam recovery on a Bloodthirsty necklace. The reason for the stam recovery is to boost our recovery pool so we can sustain better in our rotations. And the Bloodthirsty is there to increase our damage against enemies under 25% health by 10%. Now moving on to the weapons. We are using dual wield on both bars. On the front and back bar, we are running both axes and dagger. So on our main hand, on both bars, we have an axe. The front bar, we have a sharpen axe with a poison enchant. The sharpen is going to increase our physical and spell penetration even more, with that higher chance of proccing the poison damage and the poison effect. And then on the offhand, we are using a Nirnhoned dagger with an absorbed stamina enchant. This is so we can have a way of getting stamina back and deal physical damage in the same weapon. But that higher damage output from the Nirnhoned really helps us with getting greater weapon and spell damage. And then moving on to the back bar, we are using an infused axe with a weapon damage enchant. This increases your weapon and spell damage by 226 for 5 seconds. And it increases your weapon enchantment effect by 30%, reducing the enchantment's cooldown by 50%. So this means the normal base of this, if it wasn't infused, would actually be a lot lower in that weapon spell damage. So it wouldn't be as effective. And without that cooldown reduction, you would have to do damage every 5 seconds to keep this applied. With this, you only need to do damage every 3 seconds to keep it applied. Alright, moving on to the next ability, our next weapon, we are using another Nirnhoned with an absorbed stamina. Now, a lot of people are going to question, why absorb stamina on both bars? The reason for the absorbed stamina on both bars is so this way we can keep a consistent return of stamina coming in on these absorbed stamina enchants. And yes, it does work. Alright, so now that I've shown you guys this, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about skills, and starting with the class skills. I do take the ultimate, active abilities, and passives for every single one of the skill lines here within the class, and this is so I can effectively play all 3 roles more effectively. So I can play tank, healer, and damage dealer more effectively. Moving on to weapons, we primarily use dual wield, so we take the ultimate, active abilities, and passives here to get greater advantage out of our character with that type of tool. Now, you can also learn Sword and Shield for tanking and Restoration Staff for healing if you want to. You can also learn a bow if you want to. Moving on to armor, light armor, we use the top 3. Now, since we are wearing that one piece of light armor, we do want to take advantage of the passives from the light armor and the passives from the medium armor. As you can see, we have all the medium armor passives unlocked. Now, you guys will notice I do not have the active ability here unlocked, and there's a reason for that. With being a dual wield person, I'm primarily going to be using Blade Cloak or Deadly Cloak to give me major evasion, and I don't need immunity to debuffs and things like that unless I'm playing PvP, and then I'll unlock this. But I don't play a lot of PvP, so I didn't see a point in it. Heavy armor, I use the top 3. The reason for the top 3 is so I can take advantage of my one piece of heavy armor and its benefits in the passives. Alright, world skills. You can be a werewolf with this, it's very powerful, and you can also be a vampire with this, and it's very powerful. But I prefer to run without. Unless I build the character with it in mind, I just run without. Alright, so moving on to soul magic. Ultimate, active abilities, and passive. The first ones here, these first 3, are optional. The bottom 2, soul summons and soul lock, I would suggest taking. Now, with this character, you can also unlock the Ledgerman skill line, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Thieves Guild, because this will play into the idea of how this character works. This character is a thief. It is a rogue. They steal stuff. They murder people. That's their job. They are bandits. They are highwaymen. So this kind of allows you to play that in a reflective way with the Dark Brotherhood, Thieves Guild, and Ledgerman capabilities. Now moving on to the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Psijic Order, and Undaunted, I do unlock all the active abilities, ultimates, and passives for these, because the same reason as I mentioned before, it's so I can play more effectively into all 3 roles, tank, healer, and damage dealer. With having all these different skills and tools available to me, it allows me to be more effective in PvE, PvP, dungeons and trials, overland, doesn't matter where I'm playing, I can take advantage of every skill I have access to, no matter the role. So it works out in the long run. So yeah, make sure you take the ones that reflect your play style. Moving on to Undaunted, I do want to mention everything about these because they are all synergy skills, so that means your group can actually synergize with any of these, including the Taunt, also has a synergy on it. Moving on to the Undaunted Passives though, Undaunted Command is really good because it gives you 4% of your resources back when you activate a synergy, which means you get health, stamina, and magicka back. Small amounts, but depending on the kind of synergy you activate, if it's like Mystic Orbs that gives you resources back, this will give you even more with it. The next one is called Undaunted Metal. This gives you increased max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per piece of armor type. So that means if you're wearing heavy, light, and medium, all three, you will get 6% of your resources back. Or not 6% of your resources back. You get an increase of 6% into your resources. Moving on to the Assault line, or Alliance War skill lines. I take the ones that best reflect my ability to play PvE, because that's where I primarily play. So I take Aggressive Warhorn, Echoing Vigor, and Razor Caltrops from the Assault line, and from the Support line I take the Ultimate Replenishing Barrier, the 2 active abilities of Fisher and Purge, Stalwart Guard, and the 1 passive down here, Magic Aid, because I can use these really effectively in PvE versus PvP, where these were designed for. Racial skills, we are an Imperial. Imperials get some pretty cool benefits. They get Toughness, which increases their max health by 2,000. They get Imperial Metal, which increases their max stamina by 2,000. And then they get Red Diamond. This reduces the cost of all your abilities by 3%. This includes Magicka, Stamina, and Ultimates. And with wearing 1 piece of light armor, we actually get 5% reduced cost to stamina abilities. With wearing 5 pieces of medium, we get 13% reduced cost in stamina abilities. And with all ultimates, we get 3%, which is nice. On top of that, whenever you deal direct damage, you heal yourself for X amount of health, or 366 health, and restore 333 magic and stamina, and that can happen every 5 seconds. Moving on to the crafting passives. The first one we're going to talk about is medicinal use. This is in the alchemy line, and this is basically when using a potion, resulting effects last 30% longer. This is primarily what a lot of people use it for, is for dungeons and trials and PvP. I use it in a lot of different environments. When I'm doing public dungeons, when I'm doing world bosses, I still use potions because I'm mostly solo playing those. And it does work really good to have them for delves or for dungeons and trials and PvP. Gourmand and Connoisseur are both the provisioning passives I would suggest getting, and that's because they add 20-minute duration to your eaten food and your consumed drinks. That means you get 20 minutes more added to your Tri-Stat food, your Dubious Cameron Throne, your Witch Mother's Potent Brew, which are both drinks, your Tame Takeaway Broth, and your Clockwork Citrus Fillet, which are both foods. So you get that greater amount of time limit added to those, and it doesn't feel like you're wasting gold. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to go over the skills on our bars. Starting with the front bar, we have Rending Slashes, and this does damage up front. It does damage over 10 seconds. It also reduces the movement speed of the enemy by 40% for 4 seconds. And it does have increased damage on its damage up front, not on its damage over time. The next one we have is called Subterranean Assault. Now this one, you call forth some shulks that will bust out of the ground, dealing X amount of poison damage to the enemies in front of them. And enemies damaged are afflicted with major fracture, reducing their physical resistance by 5,280 for 6 seconds. This has a 20-meter range in front of you by a 7-meter wide. Your gear set, that Night Mother's Gaze, is only when enemies are up close to you that you can really get that set to activate unless you're using a bow. Remember, we use dual wield on both bars. Alright. Excuse me, guys. Moving on now to the to the next dual wield skill we have Bloodthirsty. This is a great skill. Basically, you hit 5 consecutive times for X amount of damage, and the final hit deals 300% more damage and heals you for 66% of the damage done. This is going to help you with your survivability and your damage output, because this is your primary spammable. The next ability we have is called Cutting Dive. We use this pretty much in our rotation just to add some extra damage, but also to attack enemies at ranged if we need to. We can throw out the Cliff Racer and it just helps deal some extra damage, and it does a lot of damage. The next one is Bird of Prey. We use this for the slotted effect of Minor Berserk, increasing your damage done by 8%, but it also invokes the Spirit of Agility to gain major expedition for 6 seconds, increasing your movement speed by 30%. This helps you out in PvP, but it also helps you out in PvE if you need to get to an area really fast where enemies are, so you can sprint there quicker. It does cost magicka. Moving on to the next ability, we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now this deals X amount of damage up front. As you can see, it deals a lot, and X amount of damage over 6 seconds. While slotted, your weapon damage is increased by 5%. Moving on to the back bar, we have our first ability, which is called Rearming Trap. Basically, you throw out a trap, it takes 1.5 seconds for it to arm, it lasts 1 minute. When triggered, the trap deals X amount of physical damage and an additional amount of damage over 6 seconds. It also immobilizes the enemy if they can be immobilized for 6 seconds, and it grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10% for that duration of 6 seconds. After being triggered, the trap resets and can be triggered one more time. So it actually gives you 12 seconds in total of minor force. Moving on, we have Deadly Cloak. Now this one, you basically envelop yourself in a protective cloak of razors, gaining major evasion for 15 seconds, reducing damage from area attacks by 25%, and then every 3 seconds the shrapnel will pulse, dealing X amount of damage to all enemies within 5 meters of you. This is what's going to keep your weapon damage enchant and your absorb stamina enchant on the back bar going even when you're on the front bar. Moving on, Razor Caltrops. This one, you basically throw out some Caltrops, they explode, dealing X amount of damage when it goes off, and then it deals X amount of damage every second for 12 seconds, and then it also reduces the movement speed of those enemies that walk through that area by 30%. Next ability we have is Bird of Prey, again for the slotted Minor Berserk, and then we have Bull Netch. Now this is a really cool ability because it gives you resources back over 27 seconds, and it grants you major sorcery and major brutality, increasing both spell and weapon damage by 20%. So whether you're playing a damage dealer or a healer, you can take advantage of this because the spell damage is going to give you the higher spell damage for healing, and the weapon damage is going to give you the higher weapon damage for dealing damage. And then the next ability we have is our next ultimate called Thriving Chaos. Now this does X amount of damage over 8 seconds and heals you for 55% of the damage done. Each enemy hit increases the damage done by 5% for the duration, up to a maximum of 30% more damage done. And this basically, you cross your weapons and when you attack, and it'll create an X blade that'll shoot out from you 7 meters by 8 meters, and anything hit in there is what they're talking about will increase the damage of this thing. So I've seen this thing do about 70k DPS over the 8 seconds. Alright, so that is it for the skills. Now we're going to go over our champion levels or champion points and where we have them placed. Starting with the red tree, we have 56 in the Ironclad. This is going to reduce your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We have 20 in a medium armor focus. This is going to increase your physical resistance by 1900 while wearing 5 or more pieces of medium armor. We're going to have 18 into Spell Shield. This increases your spell resistance by 1729. Moving on over here, we have 31 into Thick Skin. This reduces your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. We have 43 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from poison disease damage by 10%. And 43 in Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Moving on to the final red tree, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%, and these are not just your shields, but anyone's shields that get applied to you. You can actually, if they already have this, they're going to give you 16%, but if they have less, you're going to get 16% of the shield's effect. So, it's really nice. 19 into Quick Recovery, this increases your healing received by 5%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing the cost of Break Free by 16%, 16 into Sprinter, reducing the cost of Sprint by 10%, and 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing the cost of Bash by 10%. Moving on to the middle green tree, we have 75 in the Mooncalf, increasing your stam recovery by 14%. 43 in Arcanist, increasing your mag recovery by 10%. And then moving on over here to the final green tree, we have 40 in the Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%. And 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 in the Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. Now remember, this character can play healer fine. You're not really much of a magic damage dealer or a magic type person, primarily your stamina, but being able to heal your allies really helps, so having this 10% there can help. Moving on to the middle blue tree, we have 35 in the Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your light and heavy attack damage done with two-handed, one-handed sword and shield dual wield bow weapons, as well as werewolf form by 20%. And then 40 in the Mastered Arms. This increases your direct damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Now moving on to the final blue tree, we have 56 in the Mighty. This is going to increase your physical poison disease damage by 12%. 56 in the Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 20%. And 40 in the Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Alright, now that I've shown you guys that, I'm going to do two quick parses. One on this little skeleton guy here, or target dummy, the Precursor. This is to represent your damage in a dungeon. And then this up here, I'm going to parse on the big guy, the target Iron Atronach. And this is just to show you what your damage would look like in an organized group in a trial. Alright, so let's go ahead and pop our potion. Starting on the back bar, we're going to cast our buff, our trap, cloak, caltrops, and you notice how I'm light attacking when I weave every attack? The reason for that is so that way I can get my damage output at a higher rate. So as you guys can see, I did 28k. I can usually do anywhere between 30 and 32k, but unfortunately I made a few mistakes there, and I'm not gonna lie, I can tell now when I make mistakes really easily. So now we're gonna do, like I said, the parse on this thing. And this is going to show what our damage looks like in a trial in an organized group. That means having one of every class in our group. That means besides us, we would need a Dragon Knight, a Templar, a Nightblade, and a Sorcerer in order to get all the benefits this will give us, plus a lot of physical and spell penetration. We already get a lot of that. So let's go ahead and do our parse here. And of course, starting with the whole rotation all over again. And I will be using an ultimate in this one. And I will be using the synergies. And as you can see, I can pretty much keep up about 35k DPS. Usually I can get this thing up to about 40k when I have a really good rotation happening. And that's when I'm doing all the proper animation canceling and all that stuff. So this thing can actually pull a decent amount of DPS for somebody who uses dual wield on both bars. Now the other thing I'm going to do, of course, as always, is take this into a dungeon and show you guys this as in a dungeon setting and what it looks like in that place. So actually what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be removing two abilities here. I'm going to remove Cutting Dive and Rending Slashes. And I'm going to be moving this over so I can grab two abilities to put on my front bar so I can be a more effective, I guess you could say, just well-rounded person. So the first one I'm going to grab is Echoing Vigor. This is going to be a heal. And this is just so I can solo play more effectively. And then the Undaunted side, I'm going to grab Spike Bone Shield. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the dungeon, and if you guys are wondering why I'm not using the resistance buff either, is because this character doesn't really need it when they're solo playing if you know how to play it really well. If you're not comfortable with it, then I would suggest taking one of the abilities off the back bar and putting the resistance buff. The ice, I think this one that uses the Ice Fortress, so. But mainly you want a physical resistance buff when you're soloing normally, so you get this greater survivability and everything.
Your note said abandoned, as in no one left alive inside.
Take it to the Imperial Center.
Alright. So we're going to open the door, we're going to pop our potion, do our usual routine like we do. Oh, everything's dead. What do you know? Yeah, this guy does have some absurd damage output, I will admit that. But Imperials are really powerful if you know how to play them really well. So... And as soon as I get this guy down to about 20 or about 16k health, I'm going to let him go ahead and kill me, because if I don't, he will disappear. And I'm going to go ahead and let him kill me now. What he does is he teleports and hides, and you have to go find him. And it can make this last a lot longer. So, that is it for the Brigand Rogue, guys. I hope you guys like it. I like using the Axe Dagger combo because it does add a bleed with this character, and it's really nice because it does add to your DPS. I'm going to just show you guys real quick what I mean by that. So we're going to go back here to the parse we did on the big guy, and you guys can see here that our we got Twin Blade and Blunt. This is the damage over time effect that it did, and as you can see, it did 3,875 on a single hit because it only went off the one time. But if you look through these and you look to see when if it went off again, on some of them you'll see that it does, and sometimes it won't. Like this one, it went off again, but it went off 6 times against the boss, and it crit twice out of those times, and it was actually dealing 6,032 damage against the boss with a 4,331 base damage. So it really does add up in the long run. But that is pretty much it for the Brigand Rogue, guys. I hope you guys like this build. And like I said, this does work on any class. This doesn't just work on the Warden. It works with any class. So it can work with the Nightblade. It can work with the Sword. It works with all of them. And it's really, really powerful. So, but that's pretty much it for this build video, guys. I hope you guys liked it. If you did, you know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.